Hi, I'm Valerie Ashbaugh. I currently live in Austin, Texas, and am moving to St. Louis, and am working right now commuting. And on the plane ride to Seattle this week, I sat down next to a lady who tends to talk as much as I do, and we started talking about food, one of my favorite topics, specifically because I'm worried about food in St. Louis. And so anyway, we started talking about meatloaf, and she asked me if I had any stories on meatloaf, or maybe she didn't even ask me, but it made me start to think about my husband and my parents and meatloaf. And my mom didn't cook a lot. Well, she cooked a lot when we were growing up, but not a lot of homemade things. I tend to call homemade. One of her dishes is meatloaf, and it is my husband's favorite thing that she makes. He likes it so much that when we go home, he specifically requests it, or she'll even bribe him so that she can have him, us, the family, stay over maybe a day longer than what we normally would stay. And when she makes meatloaf when my husband comes, she has to make it extra big, and he'll even specifically say, well, tell her not to make that small one. I need the very big one. I want the big one so that I can have some leftovers. And on occasion, there's even been a time where I have two boys, 5 and 7, and when the boys started eating things like meat, he started giving them bites of his food. They like to eat off like birds off of his plate. And when they first had meatloaf, they discovered that they liked it, which was very upsetting to him because he did not have any leftovers. So upsetting that that entire day he would grouse about the fact that he wasn't going to have his leftovers. So now Mom makes extra big meatloaf for him. The funniest part about my mom and her meatloaf is if you asked her, what does she do for this meatloaf, or what is it that makes it so special, she'll say, I don't even know why Sean likes that meatloaf. All I do is throw in crackers and some ketchup and an egg. It's not that special. It's not my best recipe. Yet it's the thing that Sean, my husband, wants more than anything in the world. It's actually the only thing that he really likes that she makes. While my husband really likes my mom's meatloaf, loves it as a matter of fact. Growing up, the funny part about the meatloaf is I don't really remember liking meatloaf very much. As a matter of fact, my mom didn't cook a lot of homemade things. She cooked a lot, but it was more Hamburger Helper, that type of thing. She did make pork chops, and anytime she would make the meat things, pork chops, meatloaf, I used to dread it. As a matter of fact, I'd sit at the table, and it was Sunday lunch. It was always Sunday lunch meatloaf or Sunday lunch pork chops. But when she would make the meatloaf, I would just try to get through it. Hardly eat it. I'd eat the vegetables around it. She makes a good macaroni and cheese. I'd eat the vegetables around it. But that night I'd sneak back in, and I remember the cold meatloaf being wrapped in tin foil in the fridge, and I'd get in there with my fork. I wouldn't even put it out on a plate. I would just put it on the counter, and I'd start eating that cold meatloaf. So my favorite memories really of my mom's meatloaf growing up are the cold meatloaf. But now, since my husband tends to like it so much, and it does remind me really of growing up, that now I'll eat it more. And I actually, having talked on the airplane with Rose, now I'm starting to think about it. I miss the meatloaf, and I think I'm going to ask my mom to make some meatloaf this weekend when I travel through.